Hi, guys. Welcome to the Gig Economy Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us a day late. I see Jesper already threw me under the bus.
Of course.
Technically, it was my fault. Lost some power. And, of course, I didn't think about, hey, Jesper, can you go ahead and, make sure that you... That intro is way too long. I got to adjust that. Make sure you reschedule. Well, I didn't even know I could reschedule it right from StreamYard. I was able just to change the date and time because I hadn't gone live yet.
There we go.
So I was pretty excited about that. And thank you, Jeff, so much for rescheduling. I appreciate that.
Yep. My pleasure. Summer is all about flexibility and fun. So
yeah.
We'll be fun and flexible. In fact, flexibility seems to be the reason for the gig economy. So we must be flexibility lovers.
Oh, look at that! I already got a good one-liner.
It's a pro here. It's a pro.
For sure.
Yeah, we've been doing this a little too long.
So, as everyone knows, on opposite Wednesdays of the new show, we interview a gig creator or a gig worker. Today is a gig creator. Well, actually, the creators are usually gig workers too, so it's kind of like both. So that's called the B-side. So we have Jeff, who I know absolutely 100% nothing about. Jeff sent his links 1 minute before the show started.
Very prepared. I'm very prepared.
So I know Jeff has written a book, but before we get into that, let's talk about your gig life, what you do, if it's a full-time gig, part-time gig, what's your main gig, when you started, all that stuff.
Okay. So we can say past tense because since I've intensively been researching DoorDash after the end of my gig economy career, I could not possibly make myself go out and do it again.
Okay.
So there will never be another one. But my start in the gig economy came almost exactly 3 years ago.
All right.
We were during the pandemic and there was no work. Most of the stores were not open yet. Going to the store felt like going somewhere to the moon, maybe,
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
So, it was a relief just to get the hell out of the house and do anything and to make some money to give myself a little bit of freedom while we had so little freedom. That was good too. So I started doing that pretty much, full time. In fact, when I started, I think I knocked off 21 days in a row from my first dash because I was just, literally hungry, right? Literal hunger, not metaphorical hunger. So I did that and I realized I was listening, this is actually, kind of what I rarely talk about, which is what it was really like dashing. So I started dashing in a town that I was actually born in called Salem, Oregon. And Salem's a fairly small town. It's, a couple 100,000 people. It's the state capital of Oregon. It's fairly conservative, lots of state workers. The whole Willamette Valley where we live is really just an agricultural valley that supports most of Oregon with its economics and Falls rivers. Now in Salem, there happens to be the Willamette River that runs through the town, and there is one bridge. There was one bridge when I was born, and there's one bridge now. That was 55 years ago.
Dang.
So delivering DoorDash in Salem is a gigantic pain in the ass. You just can't get across that town efficiently. And so I did it maybe even for a few days. And I just went, holy crap. If this is the way it's working, this is the apocalypse. So I headed about 20 miles north to a little town that is filled with Hispanic migrant laborers, old believer, Russian immigrants, and retired people. Now that's a heck of a combination right there.
Yeah.
Conservative retired people, agriculture, migrant labor and resident labor, and then a huge community of Russian old believers.
Okay.
So yeah, there's 3 languages on the fire trucks I learned while I was driving around there. There's Russian, there's English, and there's Spanish on the fire trucks. Now that's pretty cool. I don't know what city you go to where you get Russian, English, and Spanish on the fire truck. So it turned out, right, this is a small town. Gosh, 50,000 people maybe in this central area with a few small towns around it. So I realized this was easy pickings.
Yeah.
Right? They've got on one end of town, they got the big outlet center that's got restaurants and everything that's right on the big freeway between Salem and Portland, the big city in the state. And then on the other side of town, they've got the more Hispanic old Woodburn that has a cluster of the other McDonald's, right? There's
Oh, wow.
one side of town. There's the other. So you between the McDonald's. So they got the other McDonald's. They got the typical fast food offer.
Yep.
And
Wendy's and so forth. Yep.
Yeah, and the good pizza places were kind of running north south from that. So you kind of got, I mean, you've got a nice little grid, right? You start on one side, you go to the other side, and then you can go up and down for pizza and to deliver to the communities out there. So, I was a newbie, but I figured out real quick, right, that if you can't negotiate quickly around where you're going, you have no hope. Right. And for Salem, I just thought it was just horrific. And all the deliveries, because Salem doesn't really have a populous part of town. It's everywhere. You don't know what direction you're going or how many miles out that direction you're going. It's a nightmare. So in Woodburn, I actually moved up there. I thought, well, first of all, I spent a few months because I was living in Salem, driving back and forth. So I was commuting, a half hour to start dashing, and then commuting another half hour home. But again, compared to doing Salem, that was a party. I was fine.
Right.
Because I was dashing like 10, 12 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
I would get there. I'm a hard worker. I'm an old guy, right? Come on. I started working when I was 9 years old, man.
Yeah.
DoorDash did not throw me, right?
Yeah.
So I learned that this was pretty cool because I could really chill out, man. I mean, there's no traffic jams. I get out and sit in the sun by the outlet mall. I subscribe to Panera for their coffee plans. I just go into Panera all day long and drink coffee. I was hopped up on goofballs more than anybody could be. So, it was going, and it was such, desperation is so interesting, right?
Yeah.
When you're desperate, it's amazing the things that you can do. Mm-hmm. And that desperation, waned over time to the point where I hit I think right around the holidays of 2021, I hit the wall, man. I had just been going through, and I'd been doing, 20-day runs in a row, that kind of thing. Because my kids are grown, right? They weren't in school. They weren't living with me during the pandemic. And I'm a single guy. So there's just me. Right. And, I like many other drivers, because I had a flexible personal schedule, I could have a flexible or highly manic work schedule, either one, however you wanted to describe that. Yeah. So I really burned out and I just crashed. And I think I laid in my house in my bed for about 3 weeks over the holidays, and I just couldn't do anything. I think I made like $400 on Christmas Eve or something, and that was it, man. I didn't dash for another like 3 weeks, and I didn't want to ever do it again, but I did. So I went back to it, did it again for another few months, kind of figured out some more ways to do it. I kind of dipped up into the metropolitan area of Portland, Beaverton, into the Beaverton area, which is a very populous suburb. And so it gave me just kind of another, I don't know, maybe just another view of the world, just from being burnout, driving the same routes back and forth in a small town.
Sure.
So it gave me something else to look at. And I'd kind of bounce back and forth between small towns. And then sometimes I go to Beaverton if it was really just dead. And I thought, I could make some money. So that kind of ran its course to the point where I needed a break, and a friend of mine, an elderly friend of mine, needed help in Washington. And so I said, hey, I'll come up and help you. Mm-hmm. She was moving into an assisted care facility. I needed somebody to help her for those last few weeks and get to the house. And so we've been close friends for a long time, and I went up there to help. And so I DoorDashed there and lived in Bellingham, Washington. So I've really done this a number of places, right? Yeah, that's northern Washington. And if you guys know Zach Drives Fast, Zach drives in Bellingham.
Okay.
That's his market. Now Bellingham's an interesting market. That's Western Washington University. It's another college town, small college town, but definitely a college town. It's right up there by the Canadian border. I mean, you drive 15 minutes, wow. you hit the Canadian border. So you're way up north Washington. I mean, you're hours north of Seattle. So that was really interesting, right? It's right on the ocean. So there's lots of different small communities up and down there. There's the major freeway I-5, and so running up and down from those communities and down to Western Washington was pretty much highway miles. So that was an interesting difference, because there was you could do some pretty good highway miles, but do it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
It was tough though, because there's a lake, there's neighborhoods, you go up, and so you could really you could really struggle to get enough time in, and the traffic was bad, and it was frustrating. It was and I think at the same time, and this is the double whammy we get. At the same time, I think the DoorDash peak of the pandemic was waning, and so I think I was feeling both that and a new market. But one of those things I learned, and if I could say one good thing for DoorDash, is that when you move to a new area, if you DoorDash for a few weeks, man, you're going to know that town. And so,
right.
And it's actually kind of, I don't want to encourage anybody to DoorDash, but it's actually kind of fun for the first few weeks, because you see where all the neighborhoods are, you see where the people live, you see where the restaurants are. It's kind of like you get your own tour of the city, of the merchant base of a city. And so I did that up in Bellingham. It really wasn't great. It was just kind of a survival thing on the side.
So that was towards the end of your DoorDash career, right?
Well, no, I still got another year to go, buddy.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did this. So altogether, I calculated that over a 24-month period, so it's been almost exactly a year since I did my last DoorDash. Out of a 24-month period, I think I worked 16.
16 months.
Yeah, 16 months.
Okay.
So there was a number of times like that Christmas of 2021 where I just crashed and I couldn't even do it for 3 weeks or 4 weeks.
Right.
And I actually, in Bellingham, I started to get physical injury on my left hip, because getting in and out of my low sedan 100 times a day, go figure, on a 55-year-old body, all of a sudden I found I couldn't hardly walk. So I thought, well, before I'm crippled, I might need to take a break a little bit. So I took a break a little bit. The pandemic was opening a little bit, so I drove down to Oregon and visited some family, and I had an opportunity to do some nonprofit work in Indiana. So I moved to Bloomington, Indiana for 2 years.
Okay.
Dang.
For that first year in Indiana, about 6 months of that, I DoorDashed in Bloomington, Indiana. And that's another college town.
Right.
It's not a huge college town. It's a couple 100,000. It's south of Indianapolis, and it doesn't have really any big cities around us. You got to drive up to Indianapolis to hit a big city, or Cincinnati's over there and all that stuff. So
what did you do to like wrap it up? Like when you've got all these cities under your belt, and then what kind of was the what's the word? The camel break, where you know what?
Well, there was one. So in Bloomington, it went pretty well. I enjoyed, I'm not from Bloomington, Indiana, so I enjoyed seeing the city, and got out and around and everything. And of course, it got old, but it was all I had, and there was my nonprofit consulting job was done, and I didn't have anything else, so I was still working at it. And about almost exactly a year ago today, I was delivering DoorDash. It was somewhere around 102, and my check engine light came on.
Oh, yeah.
And my water pump and timing belt blew.
Ooh.
That's a $2,000 repair, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
That's $2,000. So if you're a dasher and you have an extra $2,000, I don't believe you. Anyway.
But Jeff, when you first started out, I mean, and this is obviously when you first started out, this was in the city north of Salem where you were. Yeah, I know. At least for the dashers here in our area, they were all kind of doing really, really well during the pandemic. I mean, you must have. I mean, how was it income wise for you? I mean, I know you were working. If you were working 20 hours at 20 days in a row, you must have been making bank.
Well, I mean, that's kind of always the challenge of the gig economy, because we bring in cash, we bring in income, but we can't really track our expenses accurately. They make it impossible for us to do that. And so I would argue that just like most people, I think there were a lot of times when I thought I was winning, but when you think you're winning, all you need is a traffic ticket or an accident, and you're not. And so I'm gonna look.
That's true.
I just pulled up my sheet here. Would you like me to share the screen with you and show you all my earnings?
Yeah, if you want to.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Present, share screen. So here we go. So 2020. This was Salem and Woodburn. I made $15,840.90. Oh, look, and I even gave you, I'll send this to you guys if you want. So you can see this was a commute from Salem, Oregon. Oh, no, I screwed it up. Undo. That's undo is our friend.
You're right.
Okay, so commute from Salem, Oregon, and local Woodburn, Oregon, local Woodburn, Oregon, and Bellingham, and then commute Bloomington and local Bloomington. So those are all my little moves. So I made, isn't this weird? I made almost $16,000 exactly every time each year. I mean, and I was not endeavoring to do that. It just kind of evened out that way. Now, if you look at my mileage, the first year, because I was commuting, 14,744 miles.
Right.
So 2021, 8,516 miles, and 2022, 12,970 miles. So you can see the difference in where I was living. So 2021, when I was in the small town and living in the small town, I really was able to keep my mileage down. And I really focused on that. So my gross earnings per mile. So before my expenses in 2020, I made $1.07 a mile. In 2021, which I would say was kind of the strongest part of being in that Woodburn area, I made $1.89 a mile. And then 2022, I did $1.29 a mile for an average of 134. So then I did a few other calculations. I have a diesel Passat, which gets pretty good gas mileage and is pretty efficient. So I did all those things. I know what my expenses were. So my cost per year estimated of gas, you can see that right here. So I spent $1,290 on gas, $1,000 on gas, and $2,100 on gas in 2022, because the gas prices really went up when in 2022, didn't they? Like that diesel went up from $2 or $3 and something to $6. That's killing me, right? So here I am now. So I'm in 2022 now. I'm in Bloomington, and my water pump and timing belt blow up. So that's $2,000. Now it's not only $2,000 in the city of Bloomington. There was not a single mechanic that could even look at my car for a month, because Bloomington is very short on mechanics, and there's not very many people that do that kind of thing. So there's a month without wages, minus $2,000. And even at that month, there's no guarantee. I still had to find somebody to do it and come up with the $2,000 payment. So that was the straw that broke the Jeff's back. That was the end of my that was the end of my dashing career, because I really had no other. So first, I had to get my car back on the road so I could literally survive. I was 2,000 miles away from anybody that I've known for most of my life, and so I was able to do that. But I started researching the book that I had been pondering for the 2 years of dashing while I was driving around and taking notes on. So I started that in earnest a year ago, and I have been working on this ever since, and taking that experience and those writings and sharing them with other people. Because the thing, I think you guys nailed it. The thing that you have is you have lots of reporters, you have lots of stories around the world, but almost nobody that's ever written about the gig economy, except for a few guys like Sergio Vidian of the Writer Guy. But there's a few people that cover the industry for us, for our own little, and you guys do. But in general, for the general public, any reporter that ever writes about the gig economy has no idea how it actually works. They don't know how they actually get paid. They don't know how the customer, if the customers tip or don't. They don't know how much they're earning. They don't know the expenses. They don't know anything about it, right? So this is, and this is intentional, right? I mean, this came in the pandemic with the corporations, because they figured out they could fleece our pants off if they could, introduce us to corporate AI and not tell us how it works.
Right.
And so they did. And also, when we're desperate, we're the people they want to take advantage of, right? We're the rubes. I mean, I coined the term app slavery, because we do not have any independence. And when you're on DoorDash, you may think you're making decisions, you may think you're independent, just like I thought I was making at least some decisions.
Well, all the apps are like that, though. Really.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not truly independent contractors. I mean, I call myself an independent contractor, but if that was the case, then I would be able to set my own prices like a drywaller. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'm not that. We do have, the flexibility to decide what we want to take, but that's about where the buck stops for independent contractor.
Right. And we can log off jobs you want. Yeah, exactly.
We could log off, but when you're on, one of the things I learned by running all those days in a row is that it couldn't be organic because the numbers would come out the same for the same efforts in different days. I'm like, do these guys have me coded in to make $22.61 a day? Because I think they do.
Yeah, they're only going to let you make a certain amount.
Yeah, don't they absolutely cap you, right? You have you start off an hour and you make one delivery and get $12 and you make another delivery and $13 and you're 25 minutes past the hour and then you sit on your ass for 35 minutes, right? You think, I'm going to get it this time. I'm going to make 35. You can't. And that's what people don't understand is that hard work is not rewarded by DoorDash. DoorDash is a scam. DoorDash is gaslighting. DoorDash wants you to think you're working hard. In fact, they even talk about keeping drivers busy because you guys don't have enough to do. We need to keep you busy. Yeah. Right. That's why you DoorDash, because you want to be busy.
So do you have that same philosophy? I mean, you obviously wrote a book. Looks like you got a podcast about that too. But like, do you have that same? I mean, you've only done DoorDash, so you've not. I assume you haven't done any of the other gigs, right?
Nope.
So would
not even one.
I mean, you obviously are knowledgeable in them. You haven't done them, but you've talked about, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, especially in the last year since I've been doing the research of the book and I've gotten to know people and I watch all the gig creators. I watch you guys. I'm intimately aware of rideshare, but I do not consider myself, I go to people like Sergio or I go to other people for rideshare questions because I don't know. For DoorDash, man, I can tell you probably anything you want to know and probably a million things you don't.
Have you heard, what about like the other apps like Shipt or Instacart? I mean, I think they all, in a certain degree, have an algorithm to control you 100%.
They all do. They have to. So just, the quick math is if we had 15 merchants and 15 drivers, that's the math on that for the number of options is 15 factorial. That's 15 times 14 times 13, 12, 10, right? That's over $1 trillion. So if you guys can figure out $1 trillion combinations in your head, which one you're going to be getting and how to game the system, I'll call you. But so you can't, right? People, it's an illusion. This is all an illusion. And so Shipt, I think I even signed up for Shipt at one time and I don't think they ever gave me an order. I mean, Shipt is kind of spotty. A lot of those, right? You have to be in an area of the country or you have to be in a city where they're actually operating.
Yeah.
And so the one that I am more familiar with, Instacart, I had friends and relatives that had tried Instacart over time. Kind of a similar story that they had somewhat of a good experience for a few months and it went downhill very quickly.
So do you recommend, do you tell people not to do DoorDash, but do you say don't do any gig work in general? Like, is that your idea or what's your thought about that?
So it's not that it's don't do because this is an industry that was based upon desperation like I was facing. So it's not don't do it. I think we always do what we have to do to survive. But just because this gig economy came into being during the pandemic, when we were in a unique situation, people couldn't travel and get out.
It didn't come in during the pandemic. I mean, Jesper and I have been driving since 2016.
Right, but it exploded. It exploded during the pandemic, particularly last mile delivery. Yeah, and then and also with the employment that what happened during the pandemic is people needed money, and so all of a sudden you had a flood of people who wanted some work, but maybe not 40 hours in a factory, right? So you wanted something between some work and too much work, which is always the sweet spot. So I think every single one of these is a direct replacement for something that existed before. Before rideshare, there were taxis, there were buses, there were town cars, there were limos and everything else. And people got around. And before DoorDash and before Uber Eats and everything else, 99% of retailers and 85% of restaurants in the United States never had delivery options prior to the pandemic. So somehow humanity survived without the gig economy. Then the gig economy came in. Why did it come in is the question. And I think my answer here, I know my answer, is that it came in to exploit human beings and end employment as we know it on behalf of corporate America, so they could put all the risk on us and take all the profit. So it's a horrible deal. It's a scam. It is a blight on and a stain on humanity, but it's also the landscape that we have today. So my argument and what I truly believe is that the fraud of the gig economy, the fact that every offer a rideshare driver gets is obfuscated from some key information that they could use to make a real independent contractor decision. Yeah. Every offer a DoorDash person gets is an unsolvable equation. You can't possibly know, am I going to profit? Am I going to lose money? Am I going to break even on this offer? And what DoorDash does, and I know what the others have done too, is they use coercive, gamified gamification to force people into taking non-economically viable jobs, because if they don't, then they're not being a good team member and they might not, get better offers in heaven.
But right? But who cares? Like, if someone decides that they want to do that, like, that's their decision. I mean, if they have the knowledge, and again, I would say 98% of the people probably won't seek that knowledge out, research it and stuff like that. So I know what you're saying. You feel like they're taking advantage of them, but I mean, like, they kind of they got to know that they're spending gas. Like, they got to know they're not making the money that they're supposed to. I mean, even,
Well, so I think rideshare is a little bit different because the bar is higher. You're carrying human beings, so you have to have an approved vehicle. You have to have
not much higher.
Not much higher, but a little higher. You have to sign off in a little bit of an agreement. You actually see your customer face to face. They see you. There's a lot of different things going on in rideshare. DoorDash is a black box. You put it in order. It doesn't matter. They don't even care. They don't care if somebody that's not you picks it up and takes it. They don't care. So DoorDash is the bottom of the barrel of what they're trying to do. And so the scam is that this is a huge tax on society. DoorDash is jacking up the prices of food, 20, 30%. Then they're taking another 15 to 30% from the retailer. Then they're taking another 15% from the consumer. This is international corporate fraud. So there's don't do it. It's bad for humanity. You want your kids to be able to have employment. We're going down the wrong path, but it's also what we have today. Right. So if people are doing it, I think corporate AI, the best analogy I can use is human sexuality. When in human sexuality, people talk about informed consent, right? Mm-hmm. We can all do whatever we want as adults, but we should have informed consent, right? Before I do it, I should know what's going to happen to me. And is it fair? Is it not fair? What are the dynamics? And then if I have informed consent, I go, yeah, man, I want to do it. This sounds fun. Then I'm making a decision. 99% of the gig workers on planet Earth have not given their informed consent. They do not know the level at which they're being used by corporate AI to slave for global corporations, take all the risk, maybe make some money, maybe don't. But DoorDash brags about the part that their average dasher, works like 4 to 10 hours a week.
Yeah, so but that's what the gig economy was set up for, is for part-time work.
Well, it was set up to fleece you, but it was set up also to get suckers in that could work a very few hours. And so, yes, suckers, but you got to realize too, when those people work 4 hours, let's say that somebody works for DoorDash and they last for 9 weeks working 4 hours, right? That's 18, that's 36 total hours. So DoorDash will have just labor laundered. They don't have to give that person any 1099. They don't have to report it to the IRS. That is under $600. So they just laundered labor. That person worked for 36 hours. They may or may not have even made a profit after their expenses. We don't know. Maybe they wrecked their car by distracted driving and they filtered out. But that is, so the average DoorDash dasher, that's who they are, right? They're the person that never makes anything out of it. There's a few people like us that get into it full time, that learn how to work the system, that are informed, that see like, wait a minute, $22.61 every day is not a random event, right? You can't know that if you're working 4 hours a week as a stay-at-home parent for 9 weeks. So this is when Tony Schuh said we've had 13 million dashers all time. What he was telling you is we have enough rubes to take care of all of you. We don't need full-time drivers. We don't care, right? That DoorDash is the only thing you'll ever do where the more experience you have, the less they want you, because you can't be manipulated by the AI anymore, and you don't want to lose money. And so people, I mean, you see right now, I think you're seeing even people that have been fooled for a very long time waking up to what the gig economy and particularly last mile delivery are doing.
Well, what about what John said? He actually made a comment that I was going to say. The same can be said about corporate America and their employees. Like, they're all doing stuff behind the scenes that we don't know. They have algorithms there, maybe not as sophisticated as the AIs you're talking about, where they've coded something and like whatever, but like even them trying to force people to come back to work. I mean, that's a manipulation to be like, hey, we want you back. Why? Because so we can control you. You know what I mean? So
well, we were essential
AI level.
Right. We've never been so essential.
Well, right.
They missed us. They missed us. So John's point again, just so
you just said the same can be said about corporate America and their employees. Like,
no,
they're
but
doing
it can't.
The same thing.
Okay, but it can't. So let's talk about the two different types of employment relationships. In an employee relationship, I work at a company. That company employs me. That company has risk and expenses and overhead and capital and all those different things that an employer has to have. And it trains me, and it has safety procedures, and it does all the things that we people worked and unionized and fought to receive for safe employment. Right. That's what employment has. Because as an employer, let's say I run a factory. If I have an employer and I've got 50 workers on the factory floor, and those 50 workers are all being unsuccessful in making my products, how successful will my company be? It won't be successful. Okay. It can't be. So the only way I can be successful if I'm a company owner of a factory with 50 employees is if those 50 employees are successfully performing their tasks, if they're trained, if they're safe, if I can retain them, if I can do all the different things to keep them in place. Now, let's imagine those are gig workers. Now, I don't value them. I don't want to keep them. I don't care if one of them shows up one day and then somebody else shows up the other day and sits in the seat and then somebody else shows up. I just want butts in seats, right? That's all I want, butts in seats. If they get injured, well, it's not my problem. If they're not trained and they're not smart enough to do the job, maybe they won't come back tomorrow. If they injure themselves, maybe they won't come back tomorrow. If one of them starts making too many demands or making too much money, I can just tell them I don't need you anymore, because they're not an employee.
Well, yeah.
Let me just finish real quick. So if I'm a gig employer, I have no stake in the employees sitting in those 50 factory seats making. I have no stake in that. In fact, the less money they make, the more, if I can get the task done, the more money I take home. So for me, I want the least experienced, newest rubes in all 50 of those seats making me money. And so there's a completely different relationship that's built with the gig economy. And I would argue that you see that in Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub. The only incentive the corporations have is to minimize the pay of the labor. That's the only incentive. And you see that, right? They don't train. They don't make it safe. They don't give you contract conditions that stay consistent. Maybe 1 week you're not supposed to take underage minors. Now you're supposed to take it. How do they keep you safe? How do they make? Are they giving you vetted passengers that are actually the person in name? I mean, what are they doing that shows that they have the same common interest with you? And that's why I think John is wrong. In the gig economy, corporations figured out a new system where they can use humans without responsibility, and that's what they're doing. If we let them use us without responsibility, that's worse than the rest of corporate America.
Well, I guess to back up a little bit, I think he meant that they do control you. Yes, the workers are not the same. You're right. They're not. That's what I don't think he was saying. I just think the corporation typically doesn't have their employee in mind. You know what I mean? They're doing things behind the scene, maybe not AI created, but like I said, they manipulate you in a certain way to get certain amount of work done.
So my educational background is I have a master's in business administration from Duke University, and that's a top business school. And I worked as a C-level executive and an executive in the corporate world for big companies that you would know the names of. And so I'm very familiar with those boardrooms and how those things work and the privileges and liberties that people take. And yes, that happens in the world, but those people that are doing that in the corporate world, those are also employees, just like I was. So, when you go out for your $300 steak dinner, who's paying? Not me.
Yeah.
Not me. I ate like a king, man.
Right.
So, that's the difference between being an employee. And if I was a gig worker, they would have just taken my work, but they wouldn't have bought me dinner. Right. Yeah. I shaved for this.
All right. So let's take a pause here since we're definitely bumping up on time. Let's talk about you switched into the creator mode. So you've obviously wrote a book. We know what inspired you to write the book for sure. But you wrote the book for just because you wanted to reach people to not do gig work, because obviously I haven't read the book or anything like that. So just talk about that a little bit and then we'll wrap it up.
No, so I wrote the book. The book is called Full Closure, and I'm editing the book for publication later this year right now.
Okay.
And so I wrote the book and I started a podcast. The first 4 chapters are on Substack, so you can actually read the first 20% of the book or whatever.
Okay.
And chapter 2 is a doozy. That's my open letter to Dashers. Where I talk about my own experience and what life is like. So it's very personal to me because I did this for 16 months out of 24. 5,521 deliveries is not a few deliveries.
No,
and so that's a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of thinking, a lot of learning, a lot of frustration. So the book is called Full Closure because I realized nobody knows the truth of what's going on here. And
right.
And so, Full Closure actually came to me during a bout of depression, waiting for my car to be fixed so I could actually move again.
Right.
So the reason I wrote this book is to tell people the truth of the gig economy. Nobody cares about my opinion. My opinion is immaterial. What I have is proof. I studied the data science. I studied the app design. I studied the architecture and the inside of what DoorDash does, where it came from, how they do it. And all of this applies to the other gig companies too. Lucky for me, right? That as I learned DoorDash, I learned, oh, well, obviously these guys are doing the same thing. DoorDash are the kings. DoorDash has 65% of market share in the US.
Dang.
Right? They're the gorilla. Whatever they do, they're setting the market.
Yeah.
And so I wrote the book just to tell people the truth. And my original concept, funny enough, was neither to take a pro or a con position. I knew it wasn't going to be tips and tricks because I'm not advising anybody on how to go out and make money in DoorDash. I don't think you can make good money in DoorDash. The risk is too high. You might make some money like I did, but you're also going to do $8,000 of damage to your car like I did and use $5,000 of gas. So do the math. Once I got done, I didn't do as good as I was hoping I did.
Yeah.
So I wrote the book just to tell the truth. But once I started researching the data science and everything, and you'll see this in the book, I just kept screaming out loud because it was so horrific. I'm like, no way. I kept unlayering these layers of the onion of something I've been doing for 2 years. And so everything that I thought might be the case, it was 100 times worse. 100 times worse. Like these guys, DoorDash, they're evil geniuses. Every single way that you could fleece a human being, gaslight them, use them, deploy them, fleece them, enslave them, DoorDash does it, man. They are really good. And I even had some anonymous contact from inside DoorDash. People are terrified. The people that work there know they're doing evil. They know they're fleecing the world. And so scams don't last forever. Remember, Enron existed, then it blew up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then FTX existed, right? Then it blew up. I'm going to tell you, as an economist and as a business person, my prediction is for the gig economy is that these leaders, they're committing too much fraud, and it's going to catch up with them. This is not a legitimate. The gig economy is a lie. There is no gig economy. There's a world economy. The laborers that have been around that are doing this work have been around since the beginning and will be around after the gig economy. But the gig economy is a lie. There's just an economy because if you hire a rideshare driver to come take you from your house across town, That's a substitute for hiring a taxi to take you from your house across town, or a substitute for a bus across town. This is not innovation. This is just corporate predation upon both people and communities, and then also upon merchants and retailers.
Well, I don't 100% agree with you. Obviously, that's not the what we take. Now, the only thing I do agree is they're all scammy, and I don't trust any of them. But I don't believe all of that. But this is a good conversation. I think it's good for us to hear different sides than what we think. I mean, we think some of the same, but you know what I mean?
So this is the question I would ask you guys, and I would ask anybody that believes that the gig economy is a legitimate form of business. Why is it that in the gig economy, deception and obfuscation and material information hidden from every individual contract is okay? There is no other workforce or independent contractor on the planet besides the rubes of the gig economy. They made us app slaves. There is nobody else in the world that would sign fraudulent contracts every single day, all day. And that's what we do. So my argument to John and my argument to you is, even if this is what you want to do, it's illegal. We made labor laws in this country to protect people, and this is going around every labor law, every protection for humanity that was ever created. And even if we think it's okay, it's not, because it's fraud, and we can't go back, right? I mean, people do a lot of hand waving and a lot of excuses for the gig economy of why they have to do fraud, why they have to deceive every dasher on every offer. Why do they deceive everybody driving Uber and Lyft and not tell them where you're going and how many miles? Well, you wouldn't do what we want you to do if we told you the truth.
Yeah.
Okay. That is not right. So this is the end of the conversation. That's not a legitimate business model. If you come to me with that business model, I'm going to throw you out of my bank. That's fraud. You're telling me you've got a fraud scheme, not a business model.
Well, it's not that fraud because it's been going on for this long.
Well, no, it is. It's just not prosecuted yet. I mean, FTX was fraud and it went on. Enron was fraud and it went on and it exploded. And I think that's what's going to happen to DoorDash at the very least. The rideshare companies maybe have a little bit more squish room because there's more involved there, but these last mile delivery companies are DoorDash is a blight upon humanity.
Well, you heard it here from Jeff. DoorDash is dead. Tell people how they can find you. Obviously, I'll put everything in the show notes and stuff like that. But
so you can find me very easily if you put in full dash closure, DASH closure, like disclosure, but dash closure, CLOSURE. Into Google, or put Jeff Thomas Black into Google. You'll find all the different places I am. I'm on Substack if you want to read the first 4 chapters of the book, and on your local podcatcher, you can even listen to the audio versions of the first chapters of the book. So, awesome. Yeah, check it out. I'll read it to you. You can read it yourself, and it's all free. I wanted to do this to teach people and to tell people the truth, not to attempt to make money off people suffering in the gig economy. So I want people to share the information, then they can make their own decisions. Yeah. My thing is informed consent. As long as you guys know what you're doing, if it's legal, you can do it. But I'm still going to go back and say these corporations are going to get their comeuppance. They are.
All right. Well, Thank you, Jeff, so much.
Thank you very much,
guys.
Jeff.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me on. So... All right, guys. Have a good night.
Have a good night,
everybody.
Guys. This podcast is produced and edited by Hey Guys Media Group. Want to start a podcast? Check out heyguysmediagroup.com.